so after she went home.
Planning board is now in session. We ask everyone in attendance to please quiet down.
Yes.
First item on the agenda, after the call to order. Thank you all for letting us begin the meeting, is the master plan update. It's, every one of our planning board meetings now opens with the master plan update because we have a master plan update in progress. For several months now, we'll ask Mrs. Luttrell to give us the update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Master Plan Committee is meeting again this Wednesday, February 12th at 7:30 at the Senior Center. All are invited and encouraged to attend. We will be discussing accessibility, sense of community, open space and green initiatives, and diversity of commercial development. Also, we will be reviewing the second version of our survey that we intend to distribute townwide. Anything else, Andrew?
No, that should do it. You're doing a great job.
Thanks.
Thank you. Very good. How's the attendance been, Mrs. Luttrell?
We've made quorum. I think we had 12 at the last meeting that Senator Eldridge and Representative Dykema were at, and I think we had like 6 community members that were in attendance also.
Excellent.
That was our biggest audience yet. We're hoping to beat that record.
Thanks to your leadership. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the continued public hearing for the town meeting warrant article to amend section 174-10 site plan approval. This public hearing is continued from January 27th. We'll ask the town planner to give us an update on progress toward within this public hearing and toward this proposed warrant article. Karina.
Let me just bring it up on the screen here. All right. Okay, at the public hearing on January 27th, that was the opening public hearing for the proposed bylaw changes for the site plan approval section of the zoning bylaw. We had a draft which was pretty much close to the condition it will be submitted for the warrant. We got legal opinion response from town council for some supplemental questions we had that came from that first public hearing. Those items generally included the topic related to 30-day action required by the planning board once an minor site plan is submitted. How some language for extension by written agreement to go beyond that action deadline, whether or not to include constructive approval after 30 days, and then clarification on the type of vote, a majority vote by the planning board. We also asked about clarifying if both the minor and major site plan would appeal to the court system. So I have Attorney Cipriano, Town Council's opinion letter here. And basically, he gave us some minor revisions to the entry sentence when you write an article to see if the town will vote to amend the zoning code of the town of Southborough, Article 3, entitled Use Regulations by amending Section 174-10 thereof entitled Site Plan Approval as hereinafter specified. He also recommended that we replace, we had an oversight, we had left the Site Plan Review Committee referenced in Section B112. With the intent was that was supposed to, and I can show you here, that was supposed to read, so on the screen now you see the bylaw, the draft bylaw. Let me see, B1. On the screen here, you'll see the term planning board under subsection 12, such information as the planning board in yellow. Okay, then the next thing he asked was in subsection D, entitled Approval Required, inserting a phrase that the site plan approval shall be granted by a majority of the 5-member planning board is acceptable, i.e. shall be granted by majority vote, which we included in the bylaw. In this section, let me scroll down. We have to jump around a little bit because it was going back and forth. So under section D, approval required, we added the term by majority vote. So anything in yellow are the new changes to this bylaw. Then in subsection H, we struck the word inspector in the first line and inserted the word commissioner. There was a reference to the building inspector, and the proper title is building commissioner. So you'll see that in section 8 of the bylaw. And further, the question furnished the board could, as to further questions furnished, the board could insert language under minor site plan regarding extension past the 30 days by adding the phrase, but this is section B1. I'm going to go to it so we can see what we're talking about here. Oh, sorry. I can put my glasses on. Struggling. If you go to the draft bylaw, on page 2, we have Part D. It says, the planning board shall approve or disapprove all submittals for minor site plan review within the required 30 days of a completed application to the office of the planning board, but the required time may be extended by written agreement between the applicant and the board, a copy of said agreement to be filed with the town clerk. This is what we currently do for major site plan. So it's the same process. We'll have a form. It gets signed by the applicant and the chair, the planning board, and then it gets filed with the town clerk, a request for an extension. And then lastly, town council, in reviewing subsection G, the section could be revised to clearly refer to both minor and major site plan review approval as follows. So under section G, which, if you recall, was part of annual town meeting last year, special town meeting, I believe. Under Part G, we had simply changed, where did it go? E, F, G, here it is. In this particular rendition, the G says, any person aggrieved by the action of the planning board on a site plan approval application may appeal said action to court of competent jurisdiction in accordance with MGL 48, Section 17. What we're going to add here is any person aggrieved by the action of the planning board on a minor or a major site plan, so that it's crystal clear. So we can't jump back and forth. We have it in our notes to correct that, but for some reason it got missed in this edit that we have on screen. And I believe that is it. So one of the things that is kind of outstanding, you'll see in blue, is language under section, there's 2 places here, under section D, failure of the planning board to act and to notify the applicant within said 30 days shall constitute approval of the site plan, implying constructive approval if the planning board fails to act. Town council, and that's in two places. And later down here in section F, it's also repeated, failure of the planning board to act and to notify the applicant with 60 days shall constitute approval of the site plans. Town council opined that the planning board should also reconsider any constructive approval provision for minor and major site plan approval as opposed to a recommended extension provision. Automatic approval after a date certain works against the planning board as an administrative agency. So those two clauses, we left there in blue, even though town council is asking the board to reconsider those, is his advice to not include those. Because at the last meeting, members had said they wanted constructive approval left in there or clarified. So I'm hoping the board can kind of weigh in on that, which way they want it. Do we leave those clauses in, specifically saying constructive approval? Because it would be removing it out of, the major site plan section, that where it is now. So in major site plan, let me show you. Hold on. So, under Part F of the current bylaw, the second sentence reads, "The failure of the planning board to so act and to notify the applicant within said 60 days shall constitute approval of the site plan." So that's existing. So when we were working on this draft, we said, well, we should do the same thing for minor site plans. So we included that with the language that says 30 days. And that's the section, the sentence you see under Part B, 1D of the proposed changes, where it says failure of the planning board to so act and to notify the applicant within said 30 days shall constitute approval of the site plan, which falls under minor site plan section. So, that's the question.
So we'll open it up to the board on that, but it's basically you're saying that town council saying we should really reconsider any constructive approval provision for minor and major. So
Yep.
those words are basically saying we should consider removing those two sentences.
Correct. The
I,
existing one and the one we proposed.
yeah, I would tend to lean toward council's recommendation. Mr. Mills?
Yeah, I'd be in favor in removing both, and the fact that right now it appears they're inconsistent in the number of days.
Well, they're supposed to be in that respect, because major has a 60-day time frame,
Yeah.
and minor has always had a 30-day action window. So that's the difference between minor and major, but the intent is the same. It would be constructive approval if after respectively 30 days for minor or 60 days.
But I'd be in favor of town council's recommendation of removing it.
Okay.
Mrs. Luttrell?
Just for historic reference, that's in there because site plan has that, not site plan, special permit has a constructive approval clause?
I believe that is probably the case, that site plan doesn't have state statute, so typically we default back to special permit Mass General Law for all different types of the process. So that, I believe that's why that was in there, probably in the beginning, but I can't say for sure.
Yeah, I agree with town council's opinion.
Mrs. Houlihan?
I have a clarifying question. So in the rewrite in section D, it states, but the required time may be extended by written agreement between the applicant and the board, a copy of said agreement to be filled with the town clerk. Would that language be submitted into the major site plan as well? So that we cover both if there is the statement is that
Let me
approve or disapprove But if there is something in between on the 30 days on the minor, then it says, but the required time could be extended. So I'm just curious if we have some sort of similar clause on the major site plan.
Oh,
Instead of constructive approval.
I thought it was in there. Hold on, because that's what we do. We,
So-
we do,
That's the process.
and
So
I'm,
maybe putting that in words, and then I would be comfortable with town council's
let me see what
suggestion if we do
did
that.
say that. Okay, as to further questions for the board, could insert language under minor site plan review regarding extension past 30 days by adding, but may be extended by written agreement, a copy of said agreement to be filed at the end of the sentence news. So then the planning board shall approve for minor site plan review required 30 days. The planning board, but written agreement between board, okay. Yeah, I'll double check. I can't see it there right now. I thought it was in there already, but if it isn't, my guess is that it should be stated the same way too, so.
Otherwise, are you in favor of removing? So you got that.
But add extension language.
Open up to the public? Yes, sir.
Tim Litt, Woodland Road. I rarely disagree with town council, but I think the usual reason for having constructive approval is to protect the public from, a board that chooses not to act and just leaves something in the inbox forever. So it feels like it doesn't have to take a position, and you just sort of let things go until people are worn out. A compromise position might be to say, within so many days without reasonable cause, which would cover the case of, the 30-day timer expires because of administrative oversight or the weather or, someone not showing up or something like that, while still giving the public some protection. So that I don't have a extreme position on this, but I think you ought to think about it also, not just from the point of view of the administrative convenience of the board, but also from the point of view of someone from the public.
Since I've been on the board, I don't think we've had a single constructive approval unless it was somewhat agreed to. There may have been one, but the board has always taken the position that we never want to do that. We're elected to do our job here, and if the materials are there, then we vote. If there's no extension agreed to, then we vote, and we've done that several times in the past.
Sure, I understand that, and I'm not criticizing, the current board. The reason for my observation is that you guys won't live forever, and there might be a future board. Anyway, that's the kind of concern that puts constructive approval into the law.
We'll have the town planner reflect your comments back to town council and see where it takes us. In the meantime, it may be appropriate for a motion for the planning board to live forever. No? Okay.
I don't think you can afford it.
Can I comment on Tim's?
Mrs. Littrell.
So the bylaw says the planning board shall act within. So it's in the bylaw that they must. And that's appealable if they don't.
I'm not an attorney. I won't deal with the finer points of law, but what I have seen in other cases is, where you want to deal with, things beyond your control or beyond your reasonable control, you just say without reasonable cause. And that means that limits the appeal to, if you folks So, a court would look at that and, as I understand it, and say, gosh, yes, it's true that it was 32 days, but, there was a blizzard and 4 cars broke down and blah, blah, blah. So, as opposed to, it's 30 days, come, heck or high water.
Anyone else? Any other questions or comments?
Can I just ask, what you'd like me to ask town council? To leave the constructive approval in there, because he's already opined that it's in the best interest of the planning board to remove that.
Well, we just went down the board, and all 4 of us said to remove it.
Okay. All right,
We agree with council, remove it.
okay.
And then Mrs. Houlihan's comment relative to the sentence extended by mutual,
Written agreement.
that's filed with the town clerk. Should apply to both minor and major, and apparently it just is referred to in the minor.
Thanks.
So, these revisions are part of the public hearing process, and this draft will be revised again. Are these revisions too late for the printing of the warrant?
No, the revisions that come out of tonight's meeting are going to the Board of Selectmen, to the town administrator, I believe, before the 12th, before Wednesday. Because they're just minor changes that we just have now. All the substantial stuff has been addressed by town council, and over the last public hearing, and also we had discussion items prior to the public hearing opening, when we were informally bringing the bylaw forward to see if it was a worthy cause.
Okay, so,
So yes, we have time to make revisions tomorrow that are agreed to here and submit them for final printing in the warrant
okay.
on the 12th, by the 12th.
Okay. Well, that's good. So, if we close the public hearing, we can't receive any more information or comments until town meeting. If we leave the public hearing open and continue it to, would it be our next meeting, even though it's beyond the printing date?
Mhm.
Our next meeting is February 24th. So is there a benefit to continue the hearing in the event that we receive more comments, even though they wouldn't change what's being printed, but they may change what would be voted on at town meeting?
Once it goes to the printer, any changes to that will have to be made on town meeting floor.
But would be allowed to receive those comments in our meetings through the public hearing, continued public hearing, as opposed to not being able to discuss them with the public after tonight.
Correct, and I think in the past, of my experience, my short experience here, that's what has happened. I think the public hearing was left open, and any additional information, if something comes up, it could still be addressed, and then prepared something in writing so that someone could speak to it on the town floor.
Mr. Mills? Do you agree?
I was about to make the motion to continue the public hearing, so yes, I agree.
Okay, Mr. Mills?
All agree? I make a motion, we continue the public hearing for annual town meeting warrant article, amend section 174-10, site plan approval to February 24th, 2020 at 7:05 PM.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All right, we'll continue. Next item on the agenda.
Mimi, you seconded, correct? Yes, thank you.
Is continued public hearing, town meeting warrant article. Amend sections 174-9, special permit requirements, 174-18, exemptions, 174-19, extensions or alterations. This public hearing is continued from January 27th. And we'll ask the town planner to give us an update.
Okay. Let me just bring these up on the screen. Sorry, I don't have my assistant tonight. She's sick.
Even though she worked all day.
She did, because she knew that we wanted to get a lot of this prepared for this evening. Okay. That's there. Okay. Just open the documents. Okay. So this bylaw comes from the Zoning Board of Appeals, and as Don said, it was opened at the last planning board public hearing for it on the 27th. In the interim, we received, we didn't, but Katie Barry and representing the Zoning Board of Appeals and the Board of Appeals received information in regards to, from Town Council, responding to some questions that were posed. So at the last public hearing, one of the questions that came was the proposed change under Section 174-9, special permit requirements. And being proposed was to strike the last sentence, no special permits under this subsection shall be granted for non-conforming signs, subject to Chapter 93 or 93D of the general laws. Town Council provided a letter reading as such, dated February 5th. The Planning Board is questioning the relevancy of signage regulation under MGL Chapter 93 and 93D. Both the Planning Board and the ZBA believe reference is no longer relevant in the bylaw. In this regard, please be advised that deletion to a reference to Chapters 93 and 93D of state statute, which regulates outdoor advertising and signage, is appropriate as any regulation would be non-jurisdictional to the ZBA. Municipalities have reserved powers under MGL Chapter 93D, Section 5, to petition for injunctions to restrain construction or maintenance of outdoor advertising constituting a public nuisance. Accordingly, there is no relevance nor jurisdiction needed for municipal boards, and deletion is appropriate. This office also has no record of the genesis of these provisions. We continue to work on the revision under Section 174-19, which is to follow. So Town Council opined that it was appropriate to strike that last sentence. So this copy of the bylaw reflects that change. In addition, Town Council provided a second opinion regarding Section 174-19, exemptions, alterations, reconstruction, and structural changes. And what town council did, and I'll just read the first sentence here. We have expended additional time to evaluate and revise the very important amendment to non-conforming structures and uses in an effort to have the bylaw reflect the contemporary status of law and in the context of the proposal submitted to us, which is the subject of your public hearing. In that regard, please see attached draft suggested revisions. As previously indicated in a legal opinion to the building commissioner, the standard of review for such non-conforming structures based upon case law has lessened as it relates to single and two-family structures. These revisions reflect the standard of review. So town council provided kind of a not a reformatting, but a cleanup of the complete section 174-19, which aligned itself closely to the one that the building department had already provided, which I have shown here redlined. What town council did do, however, is make reference to Mass General Law. So if you're looking at the redlined copy under section 174-9, you'll see that you have section A, B, and then a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then closing paragraph. According to town council's recommendations, this is exactly from his language was incorporated into the proposed bylaw changes. Again, just pointing out references to Mass General Law, and from the last version, he added number 5. I think that was the one that was added. Previously, there were 4 sections. It may align itself, because the red line one reflects all of Aldo's, town council's changes here. So again, it's in keeping in what we had seen in the last version of this bylaw revision, but kind of cleaned up with some additional reference to Mass General Law. And let me see what the last one looked like. Alright. I have a copy, I do have a copy of the prior bylaw revision.
Hold on a second.
Okay.
Does the board feel that that update is sufficient without going into more detail?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Excellent, Karina, thank you. And since we don't have anyone from the ZBA here to add any more to this, not that we really need it, Aldo has once again, town council has once again given us very excellent and timely responses to our questions and clarifications. So it does appear that I know I've read what Aldo has resubmitted. I think he sent this in on last Wednesday, and I thought it was fine. So unless we hear something from the board tonight or the public tonight, then the board would, I guess, give you instructions tonight to send this through the town administrator to the selectmen. Does that sound right?
No, actually, the board at some point may have a consensus on supporting the change in general. The zoning board of appeals actually sends the draft to the board of selectmen, to the town administrator's office. We're having the public hearing as part of the procedure.
So, okay, that, instead of sending what I said in the direction of directly to the town administrator, we would send what I just said basically through you to the ZBA.
Correct. Saying that the planning board is on board with the changes. Is that the terminology, or?
I think so. Let's see what the board thinks. Mrs. Houlihan.
So I'm comfortable with the language as is and to be submitted, that the rewritten, redlined that you've proposed that Aldo has, town council has opined on.
Yes, we call that the February 10th, 2020 version.
Which one?
The one that I showed tonight and that reflects town council's changes as recommended.
So you took,
We didn't. Katie Barry at the building department, who is the one who requested the legal opinion request from Aldo to review this.
yeah,
And his response was this
yeah,
document, which she incorporated into that.
she did that.
Yes.
Okay,
Our opinion, our legal request, our question to Aldo was that last sentence referring to the 93 and 93D. He answered that in a separate letter.
yeah.
And then he responded to the ZBA's request for reviewing the bylaw in general.
Thank you. Mrs. Houlihan? We all set? Mrs. Luttrell?
I support the bylaw change in the revisions dated February 10th.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we have the town planner move forward and make the recommended changes to Article 1 miscellaneous provisions, 174-9 special permit requirements, and 174-19 extensions, alterations, recommendations, and structural changes to the
ZBA.
ZBA.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. I have a question. On the agenda, and maybe I missed this, it talks about 174-18,
Yes.
and we've just been talking about 174-9 and 19.
Yes, I'm sorry. I failed to mention that there were no changes proposed in 174-18, so it was removed from the warrant language, warrant article language.
So so by doing that, we're asking the town meeting to just look at 174-9 and 174-19.
Correct.
Okay. Motion's been made and seconded. Any more discussion? All in favor? 4-0.
Since we're moving on forward, do we close that?
Is there any benefit to keeping the public hearing open, Karina, in your opinion?
Well, there's always an instance that something could come up, and but it is going to print exactly the same as the planning board sponsored bylaw changes. So if the board feels that there may be a chance that some additional information might benefit, it doesn't hurt to keep it open.
Keep it open. Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we continue the public hearing for annual town meeting warrant article, amend sections 174-9 special permit requirements, 174-18 exemptions, and 174-19 extensions and alterations to February 24th, 2020 at 7:10 p.m.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? We're continued. Okay, next item on the agenda is a continued public hearing for a warrant article for town meeting to update section 174-12.1, outdoor illumination. This proposed warrant article, this public hearing is continued from January 27th. We'll ask the town planner to give us an update.
Just get this in order. Okay. Just bear with me, I'm just gonna load the current version of the bylaw.
Mrs. Houlihan, have you met with the professor on this? You want to tell us? Go ahead.
Sure. So we had a meeting today. Sarah, although she was sick, she called in to a lengthy conference call with myself, Destin Hellman, the professor, and myself. So we discussed the changes. We've made some modifications based on some public feedback received, as well as, obviously, Karina will go through the legal suggestions. I think just to highlight, one of the key pieces was we had originally put in there a 5-year provisional time to retrofit non-compliant fixtures. And we have subsequently removed that language with the hopes of maybe revisiting that in the future. But I think with the prospect of really, the goal is to have an environmentally friendly lighting plan that can be served to the residents of Southborough and anybody building in Southborough. We thought it would be the path of least resistance. And then we are just making some additional modifications and hopefully getting the language as close to possible so that we might be able to we will be submitting on Wednesday for printing. And then we will be making some plans to meet up with the Board of Selectmen, Advisory, Zoning Board, Conservation, Recreation, Open Space, and a few other boards that I can't think of off the top of my head, so that we can begin to shop around the language and share the intent with people in the community and the committees in town. Additionally, we've scheduled 2 evening programs. The dates I can pull up if you give me a minute, for just community awareness, so we can educate the public on why we're doing this. And there's one set in February and one set in March prior to town meeting at the senior center. So I'll provide those dates if you give me a chance to look those up.
Excellent. Karina?
Okay, so since the last public hearing, at which we had received review letters from facilities and from the building commissioner, revisions were made, and a legal opinion request in the form of supplemental questions in an email was sent to town council. And again, those reflected the question on the viability of the 5-year retroactive compliance paragraph, clarification on to applicability if this if the bylaw for outdoor illumination was applicable to single-family and 2-family properties, and streetlights are now not exempted in there. What happened is John Parent came to our office, and we had a good brainstorming session, and at which we were able to contact together the National Grid representative for the region, who explained the process that the public utilities need to follow state required tariffs that are created. And so initially the concern was that the bylaw, as was proposed, wouldn't be able to be met because the tariff may not have aligned itself with what the bylaw was looking to do, and that's the 3,000 Kelvin color rating. So during this call, it was great because we found out that it is true they could meet that. It put a lot of the concern that facilities had because of the streetlights and under their purview and the program that they replaced the lights, and they already had inventory and all that. So put that to rest, and it was agreed to leave them in. One thing that I think that had something to do with the heights too, right? There was something to do with the heights, but that was worked out as well. So that came to a good resolution. Town council also agreed that it was not very defendable to have the 5-year retroactive compliance. So the working group, I believe, came up with something other than that, which helps to promote the lighting to go in the right direction, and that was that moving forward, if your lights fail, break, don't work anymore, whatever, that you would comply with the bylaw when you replace your fixture. So that was great as far as the luminaire goes, but then the question came up on, well, there are lights on buildings that are already set at certain heights, which may not comply with the height restrictions set, which is similar to the height restrictions that are now. What do they do? Because the building is wired through the inside with the electrical wiring to the outside. You don't want to force people to rip up their walls and all that kind of stuff. So it was determined that, A, moving forward, you'd comply if your fixture breaks, but the non-conforming height would remain. You wouldn't be forced to change the height of your light based on the new bylaw. Unless, of course, at such time, if you came in with a project that was demolition, changing the site totally and you were replacing poles, the new poles and the new lights that are on the building would have to conform. But if you're existing, you don't have to change the height if you're already, have been approved for that height. What else? Let me see here. So I just want to briefly go over town council's opinion here, if there was anything that I did miss.
I think you covered
I think I
the
did.
first paragraph,
Yep.
where it says the first question. And then,
Yep, that's still all based, the first few paragraphs are still all based on the retrofit.
and then the other part about the single-family and two-family lots.
Yes. To explain that, initially, town council opined that they are included in the applicability, but he took a perspective that we weren't seeing based in the purpose, which indicates that you have to prevent glare on public ways, which is if you're shining light off your property onto public way, or protecting the privacy of residents, so that means like a butter to a butter. So that was kind of like a bird's view indication that it was applicable to residential lots. Then we further asked, could you please just spell it out that specifically it's 1 and 2 families, because the building department was still concerned with enforceability, enforcement of what you do. So he did that in the later opinion, but in talking to the building department, the analogy that I provided, which I think helped clarify the concern with enforcement, is like, we have a stormwater management bylaw. We have an outdoor illumination bylaw. We have a site plan bylaw. In the site plan approval, it lists you gotta follow lighting, so you refer to outdoor illumination. It says you have to show drainage, so you refer to stormwater management section. But that's not exclusive. In other words, it only doesn't take a site plan to get you to follow those things, because both of those bylaws have thresholds that do not require site plan approval. So if you have a single-family home and you build a tennis court and a pool and you disturb more than 50% of the lot, you have to give stormwater management permit, but you don't have to get site plan approval, right? An analogy is, in lighting, the thresholds are based on the wattage of the light, the lumens. So if you have a spotlight or exterior light, it's the 60-watt light. Higher than that, you have to, it could be 60 and higher, but you have to adhere, it's the applicability, you have to adhere to the outdoor illumination. And for other exterior lights, if it's over 120 watts, you have to apply to the, you have to follow the bylaw, but it doesn't mean you have to go get site plan approval. So each one of those bylaws has a threshold that doesn't, outside of site plan approval, there's still criteria you have to follow. And therefore, it kind of showed, not to mention that the last sentence says, there'll be no trespass of light from any lot in the town, right? So, in that sense, that's how I was kind of explaining it, which led to the enforceability part, that, you know, we don't go around looking for infringements, but if there is an issue, just like if you have your shed on someone else's property, and that person says, this person's got shed on my property, you go to the building department, they say, okay, well, you have to kind of prove it. So you go get a surveyor, they stake your property line, you go back and you say, look, here's the proof, it's a professional stamped, and the building inspector says, okay, now I can probably do some enforcement. You know, they go, you gotta move your shed. With light, it may be similar in that, this is just my take on it, that say someone says they're shedding light across onto my yard, or the spotlight's shining right in my window, you can have the lighting manufacturer, or you can have a specialist come out and they can show with a meter what the lumens are, or the foot candles are at your property line. And then they could document it and they could bring it to the building department, because the building commissioner doesn't have a way to measure that. And besides that, between butters, it's a civil issue. So if they have a complaint, they kind of have to, just like with a shed, they have to bring to the building department that there is a infraction. They have to prove it. You can't just say it and then the building inspector has to go out there. Who's ever complaining has to show and prove that it's an infraction. And then the building commissioner could take action. So I thought that was kind of an analogy, but, you know, that's just from a limited perspective.
So,
That's a long sentence, sorry.
where did you get all of that? The first part about,
The preventing glare on public ways and protecting privacy of residents was,
no, I thought you said that Aldo gave you that he looked at it from a different point of view. And I understood where you said that there's sections in the code that have limits relative to height, relative to, stormwater drainage,
yeah,
that apply whether a site plan is triggered or not.
right.
And I think we all agree with that.
Mhm.
But the part about the light trespass, you're saying that that's similar to those other examples?
What I'm saying is, if you look at the bylaw, the very last section, let me just scroll down to it. Section Q says light trespass limitations. There shall be no light trespass by a luminaire beyond the property boundaries of the lot on which it is located, except as within a street right-of-way for which there shall be no limit. That is verbatim in the existing bylaw, right? So that was another area that was kind of a contentious, well, what is every lot? Residential lots, commercial lots, it kind of just said lots. So Sarah did some research and she called the town of Westwood, who has almost identical bylaw. I don't know if we took it from them or they took it from us, right? And asked them, how do you interpret it? And they say, we interpret it that it applies to residential, single family and two family. So when we got Aldo's first opinion, where he referred to, the purpose section of the bylaw, and if you look back at the very beginning of the proposed bylaw here, because the wording is the same, under Part A, purpose, it says, prevent glare on public roadways under number 2, and it says, protect the privacy of residents under Part 3. That's where, in his initial opinion, he made reference to that in the third paragraph, where he felt it was applicable because of that. And then he provided a second opinion because we forwarded this information to the building commissioner, or he copied her on it because she's involved in this. So he provided a second opinion because it wasn't clear, and Lori was not on board with that interpretation, like it wasn't crystal clear, does it or not? So on February 6th, there was a letter from town council, and it says, in subsection B, applicability, if it's the third or fourth paragraph, if the board wishes to clearly define application to a single and two-family residential lots, then it could so be specified in the last line of the first paragraph after the phrase provisions of this section, such as including application to a single-family and two-family residential lots. Note, we have already identified certain provisions under the purpose clause intended to protect private residences, and this would clearly define applicability if that is the planning board's intent. So, I think he's saying if the planning board wants to go that path, that it does apply to residential, this is how you would do it. But that further, it does, and I'm not super clear on it, but identify certain provisions that under the purpose said it was. It's kind of convoluted.
So my understanding is that our current lighting bylaw, town council has opined, applies to all lots. Applies to residential.
It appears to be that, yes.
Yes.
My understanding of what I'm reading, I believe that.
And the proposed amendment also applies to residential. And Aldo's additional language is just to clarify that, so
Right,
there's
because
no
the language is
question.
the same. So the existing code had that language in it.
Right.
Because the applicability, we wanted to go apples to apples, right? Because it was a new approach to how you technically view the lighting behind the scenes. The structure of the bylaw was attempted to be, same to same. So that language under the purpose is the same, and under the applicability, except that now streetlights are not exempted because we came to an agreement with that. So that's the only change, I believe.
I think purely for context setting, I think the building commissioner disagrees that this applies to the residents. And so we felt strongly that including the language that it applies to single family and multifamily, or whatever the actual language is, needed to be put in there, because we've operated as the planning board, as a bylaw would apply to a Southborough bylaw should apply to people of Southborough as well as people building in Southborough. And so we wanted to be very explicit if there was still some contentiousness behind that. So that's the purpose for the clarity of that language.
And the explanation I gave before between the stormwater management drainage type of bylaw and outdoor illumination is the conversation that Laurie Lavoli and I had. My impression was that it gave her a perspective of looking at it beyond the site plan review, because it tends to be a block. People say site plan review and or nothing, right? Site plan review says you do lighting, so you go to the lighting bylaw, that's what you follow. Stormwater, you have to have drainage, so you go to stormwater, but that's not the case. The individual bylaws have these additional caveats in them that apply to lesser, not, I don't want to say lesser in that sense, but, other projects. With or without site plan. And, I'm trying to just recall, because there was, opinion from town council on enforceability, that the zoning bylaws are enforced by the zoning enforcement officer, which, we all know that, and the building commissioner knows that. But I think it was one of the questions, who enforces this across, we asked that, she asked that. Because lighting is it's more intangible than other things like stormwater.
So, if the neighbor's having a wild party and the music is way up too loud, they usually call the cops. And the police come, and even though there's no noise ordinance in Southborough, police would probably say, can you turn it down a little? Same thing with the lights. It's quiet, midwinter night, stars are out, street lights are on, and your neighbor's floodlight, driveway floodlight, trespasses onto your property, you call the cops. The police come after controlling their laughter. They show up and probably should be, even before they show up, be prepared to say that they don't respond to those complaints, that the procedure is, and the procedure would be to measure that light at the property line and submit it to the building commissioner for review and potential, for compliance review and potential enforcement. All of this, I think it's going to be important. It's important tonight, of course, if anybody's watching, to know, it's very important to know that we're not changing that right now it's enforceable. Right now it's a requirement. So it's important, it'll be important at the town meeting to say that this isn't changed. It's just further clarified, and maybe even the bylaw, the proposed bylaw doesn't get into, or does it, into greater detail as to what, if non-compliance is suspected, what do you do? Go ahead, Marnie.
We actually just added that this evening, so it's not in this current draft, the applicability, enforcement, violations, and relief. And so we have actually borrowed language directly from the town of Pepperell that is doing this almost exact lighting bylaw. So we have adapted some of that language. We know that we already have enforcements, and we'll refer to that section in the zoning bylaw. And so it'll be just clear on how, who enforces, reflecting back to that particular bylaw. And then what is the grievance process?
Yeah, I think the people have to know. I mean, they're gonna be sitting there like I am right now, thinking about my driveway light and wondering if it trespasses onto my neighbor's property, and if their lights trespass onto my property. And I think the answer to both, at least in my case, is yes. So does that mean that, you know, they're gonna pull the electricity off the pole from my house until I fix it, or am I going to be carried away in handcuffs, or is nothing going to happen? And I think it's important that, because this has been on the books for so long, and for the most part, as far as we know, maybe the building commissioner could add, that people just live with it, or they appreciate the neighbor paying for electricity to light up your yard instead of you. It's something that it's really important, because I think if they think that this is a change, they'd feel threatened and realize that they're suddenly in non-compliance, and it changes everything, and it really doesn't have to.
That's right.
It's really important that we emphasize that. Go ahead, Karina.
Oh, so, in the bylaw, currently, the existing bylaw, section 174-24, enforcement procedures, violation and penalties, talks about structures, and the zoning enforcement officer has a right to do enforcement if the bylaw is not complied with, okay? So in the Pepperell document that Marnie was referring to, that the working group had used as a template to add language, they have this administrative guidance that, I have a better document to show that. I just created it over here. Let's see where it is. This will be clearer. Hold on, just can't see. I took your email, Marnie, and I put it into proposed enforcement language. So if you look at A and B, these are the two I just referenced out of 174-24, which exist in the current existing bylaw. This chapter shall be enforced by the building inspector or zoning enforcement officer, et cetera. No structure shall be erected, altered, demolished, moved, or use changed, blah, blah, blah. And then it talks about violations. And then you had here, we would like to include the Pepperell detail in enforcement in the proposed changes. In their document says the town of Southborough, so this is a proposed language for that enforcement. The town of Southborough is authorized to promulgate one or more interpretive documents to aid in the administration of and compliance with this bylaw. The owner of any lot or property on which a luminaire or sign subject to this bylaw is located or proposed to be located shall have the burden of demonstrating that the existing or proposed luminaire, or sign complies with the standards established by this bylaw. The manufacturer's specification sheet may be used to establish the lumen level of a luminaire, the CCT, and if required, and CCT is the color correlated temperature, which is the Kelvin's degree. So CCT is the Kelvins. And if required, to verify the use of fully shielded fixture design. Illumination levels may be verified through the use of a manufacturer's photometric data sheet and/or photometric site drawing, or through on-site calibrated light level meter readings. A site visit at night by a representative of the town in the form of a visual observation and/or a photograph may be required to determine if the nuisance has occurred. Violations and relief reference to Town Code 174, Section 24, enforcement, which we just read above. And I'm wondering, is that something that goes in the bylaw, or would that be better suited in the regulation? Or is this a, it gets very technical, the language towards the end there, like what you can use and how you rank it, and
Yeah, I guess that's something Destin would probably answer, but I don't think with this new bug rating and the way that the lighting has gone, the luminaire, the CCT are what are used in the photometric plan is still the same. So I don't know from the technical, I don't think that would change even in 10 years' time. I don't think that technology, unless something really happens, changes. And if it does, maybe it's time to revisit the bylaw. So I think we had proposed to put it into the bylaw just because it is administrative guidance to interpreting the bylaw. So it's something that the planning board could reference as it is reviewing site plans. And it's within the bylaw, so it's clear as to what is the burden of proof and who is it on.
So Aldo's going to read all of these all over again. And in at least one of his previous recommendations, he's told us that there's certain language, technical language, that should not be in the bylaw, should be, in the regulation. So I would suggest we leave it in, because if it has to be revised on the town meeting floor, it's easier to delete. People understand deletions more than they understand additions. So it would be an easier thing to delete than it would be to try to add it back in.
so just to be clear, what the working group is proposing to add in is 7.1 and 7.2 as shown here from your email to me.
I actually forgot to change the numbers, so technically it would be the new section C. So we'd move definitions to D, and this would be section C.
So add a
1 and 2.
section C.
And 1 would be administrative guidance, and 2 would be violations and relief.
C2.
Haste makes waste.
Insert. I figured when I saw the numbers, because that's the same, because that's not in there right now. And if you want, we could quickly go through the current revisions from the last one in yellow and show where this would be inserted, if the board wants to do that. Just to the bylaw. If you're okay with it, then we understand where it goes. And any of the revisions that were made were based on town council's review and some formatting and typo errors that I picked up, and expanding on, you know, if you had IDS or something like that, explaining what that meant. So those types of things for consistency. It's up to the board.
Arnie, a couple more questions. How'd you find out about Pepperell?
That was Destin who found out about Pepperell.
Are there other Pepperells out there?
There are, and he's pulling those for some of our meetings around town.
Okay, so that the people will know that
We're
this
not
is,
trailblazing.
we're not creating something that we don't know what we're doing. There's others out there that are doing it.
Absolutely.
And how about the industry? Have you heard anything, have you reached out to the industry, or do you have anything from the industry that, like we did with the solar bylaw, where the solar panel manufacturers and installers provided a lot of support and input toward what we eventually became a bylaw? Anything from the industry?
So Destin is doing that. So he's working with both the industry who produce the guidelines and then enforce the guidelines, and then people that are working on this side of kind of installing lights. So he has perspective that he has been able to kind of collect to share with people as we've gone about this. But everything here is industry guidelines as industry shaping, also as state governments are shaping around specific outdoor illumination. And so we're seeing that. I think he's mentioned there's some bills in front of Congress now in Massachusetts.
So, Karina, do you have a feel for how many warrant articles there are for the town meeting?
32, 30? 35, okay, 30, I knew it was in the low 30s.
Now that Sam has spoken, I'm going to pick on him, but I'll go for you first. Do you feel that this is the most technical proposed bylaw?
Oh, on the current warrant?
Yeah.
Yes.
And how about, are there any others out there that are, well, obviously they'd be less technical, but would be controversial, challenged?
I didn't, you mean of the bylaw changes? The proposed bylaw change articles, or all the articles?
All the articles.
There may be some budget items.
Yeah, other than budget, yeah. No, the reason is, when you go to the town website, if there's some really interesting things, or things that, like, would affect everybody, like your taxes are gonna go up, or, there's a new noise ordinance, which there isn't, then I guess I would ask that somehow we get this far more visible. I guess that really applies because it's light, but far more visible on the website. So when you click on the town website, it's not buried, several clicks into looking for things. It's right there. If they'll let us do that.
You mean the proposed language?
No, that, just maybe one sentence that says something like, please check out the proposed new outdoor illumination bylaw or changes. Because you're going to hear this at the town meeting, that, when did this come up? It's the first I've heard of it. Now, you're going to have those 2 information sessions, which is excellent. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we had proposed to put together an FAQ for rather mass distribution, and my plan was to get to get a targeted list of information to people that have been known to attend town meetings over the last 5 years. So specific mailings, if that's possible. So I don't know, we would have to talk about a budget and what that looks like. Or we can certainly solicit donations. But from anyone here. But I think that the goal would be for a broad distribution. I've definitely learned my lesson over the years in presenting to town meeting that people need to be aware. So we are trying to do as many options as possible.
And two things, to your first question, Don, on the website, you know, we have a place where we can do flashes like this that, you know, it runs through, and it might be something to bring people's attention to a link that then is on the planning board website that
Yes.
might have a flyer or something.
Like bring stars back to Southborough.
Yeah, something creative and supportive and enthusiastic. The second thing is, depending on, you know, mailings, if they're a certain type, have a discount if they're considered magazine or something like that. Like, it's not, but the worst case is 50 cents a letter. So even if you do, because that's the standard postage.
Is that what it is?
Mm-hmm. So if you do, you know, it's not a huge amount, and we could possibly fund it if we take a closer look.
Yeah, I think that's what my plan was, to actually come and do the diligence so you don't have to. So I'll take that on and kind of prepare what that looks like.
Okay.
And then, Mrs. Houlihan, who do you plan, like, for example, yourself, to present this on the stage at town meeting? Would that be you?
Why, Chairman Morris, I thought you would like to do that. I'm kidding. Yes, I was planning to do
defer
that.
to you, but I'll help you if you'd like. Usually, that's not a good thing.
I would like Professor Hillman to do that with me as well.
Sure, that's the way to go, yeah. So, what we've done in the past, and I think we did this most recently with the technical bylaw with the solar panels, was keep the public hearing open. Have you prepare your PowerPoint presentation along with your verbal accompaniment of the slides, and then whatever handouts you have or that would be as part of the, you know, the website presentation. And then during the public hearing, as early as our next meeting, we would go through what would be the first version of your presentation to town meeting. And we'd have that during the public hearing, so, and during our planning board meeting, so it would be televised. So maybe there would be a greater number of people that go to town meeting that would have already seen it. And then, as we work our way toward the end of March, make revisions to the presentation and continue to present at each of our meetings. That's the way we did it before with the solar, and I think we did it with others in the computer age with the PowerPoint presentations. And it's also a good like rehearsal for the town meeting, and you're able to have a smoother presentation, but also be open to questions here in the public hearing that would head off questions. You could include those in your revised presentation and head off those questions. Yeah.
Just also note that the moderator has a restriction on time, right? So usually, yeah, it's short, so, like when you did the Tree City USA presentation at town meeting, right? It was only like a handful of slides. It was very effective.
We also have had presentations from other boards, if you remember, and I think it was just last year,
Mm-hmm.
where we were promised that it wouldn't take more than 10 minutes,
Mhm.
and 25 minutes later, it was still going. I don't know if you remember that, but I do. So, and it wasn't this board. And sometimes they're more welcomed, and that's, I think, why the moderator allows the time to go beyond. But I think people certainly respect those who present within the time frame. Open it up to the public. Yes, sir. Tim?
So in that 7.1 that you're thinking about adding, I would make it a little shorter, but in any case where it starts off with the town of Southborough, I think you want to say the planning board. You don't want to open it up to, any part of the town of Southborough. This is a planning board thing, and you want regulations to be issued by planning board.
It may impact the building department, though.
Any other questions or comments?
I would like to thank Mrs. Houlihan for all your hard work.
Second.
Any comments from the Board of Selectmen? We take that as full support of this moving forward, Sam?
No comment for now.
He said no comment, but I believe what we really heard was full support. Mr. Mills?
I make a motion, we continue the public hearing for annual town meeting warrant article update to section 174-12.1 outdoor illumination to February 24th, 2020 at 7:15 PM.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? We're continued. Okay.
Could I just ask one question? As far as what goes to print, is that what was presented this evening with this addition? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, next item on the agenda is an approval not required. Dell EMC, Washington Street, Lot 1. We have on our desk in front of us the,
Mr. Chairman, I'll be recusing myself from this. My husband is employed by Dell.
thank you. We'll ask the town planner to give us the background on this A&R. Probably the #1 street in Southborough that's had so many revisions. All good.
Okay. Sorry, it took so long here. So on February 3rd, Dell on February 3rd, EMC Corporation, represented by Beals and Thomas, Surveying Department, Mr. Ken Conti, who's their professional land surveyor, filed an application for approval not required for Lot 1 on Washington Street at the Route 9 and Causland Drive. This started several years ago where they have to go to the town of Southborough as well and get endorsement, and they had gotten that, and then,
Town of Westboro.
I'm sorry, the town of Westboro. So there's dual endorsement required, and they had gotten that, but things changed. In the interim, Washington Street, as it is built now, has been accepted by the town. What you see on the plan up here is the prior Washington Street, which has been abandoned. And then long, long ago, there was a Washington Street, which is the old Washington Street, which created some questions over here, which Beals and Thomas finally determined the ownership and how it gets split and where it has to go. So the goal of this plan is to create this one large Lot 1 based on Assessor's Map number 24, parcels 1B, 1C, 1G1, 1G2, which are little pieces of the old Westboro Road, 1F1, and WSA-1A. These are known as, this little triangle up here is known as just Turnpike Road is the address. This larger area right here has an address of 374, and then this side of the lot on the eastern side is 360 Turnpike Road. I had suggested that Surveyor Mr. Conte attend this evening so that he could answer questions, because this is a pretty involved set of plans, because there are 4 sheets here which detail all the changes. But just so you know, we sent this to Fuss and O'Neill for review. And I'm just looking for the thing. And they provided a review. And some of their concerns were, would you like me to read them? They're not very many. So Fuss and O'Neill conducted a review of Beals and Thomas's initial plan before they actually filed, so that we could get everything straightened out for tonight's meeting and have a pretty good final plan. Fuss and O'Neill indicated in a letter dated January 10th, 2020, that the applicant shall submit a properly executed Form A, which is the A&R application, which they have done and which was filed with the town clerk. They were to confirm that any decisions by the Zoning Board of Appeals, which can include variances and exceptions regarding the land of any buildings, if there were any, they indicated that there were not. They were asked to include all abutters from the latest available assessor's record, primarily abutters located south of Washington Street. So when they first came in last week to deliver the official plan, I went through this list of comments from Fuss and O'Neill, and they had forgotten to put the abutters along the south side. So they took their plans back and fixed them, and now show that it's EMC Corporation to the south. It's a technicality, but it's important, because if these get recorded, all the information should be there. The other thing was existing above and below ground structures and streams and wetlands shall be provided on the plans. If applicable, please show location of existing above and below ground structures, streams, and wetlands. When I queried the surveyor on this from Beals and Thomas, he said there were not any other than what was shown on the plan. The other concern was they had accidentally referenced 3 zones that this parcel was on. It's not, it's industrial park. So they corrected that as well in the notes. So here we have a plan, industrial park zoning district. The map, it appears, as the parcels are located only in the industrial park zoning district, which they fixed. I asked Fuss and O'Neill to provide a final follow-up letter, which I hadn't received yet today. This was a pretty quick turnaround, because they submitted this the beginning of last week, and then I got it to Fuss and O'Neill. But I had looked through these items, and they seemed to have been satisfied. But I just wanted Fuss and O'Neill's backup. And again, I was hoping they would be here so that they could answer any really detailed questions. If you look on the plan, the goal is to take, like I said, this whole eastern portion, combine it, and convey small pieces of the old Westboro Road to the appropriate, so then eventually they have one big lot. They also still have to go to the town of Westboro for the portion of the A&R in that town. That's all I can tell you.
Thank you.
Oh, and we did receive a certificate of authority to sign the application since the corporation. That came with the application. Because sometimes the facilities people sign, or the since it's a corporation, we require that they provide backup that they have authority to sign the applications.
So, the letter dated February 3rd says, on behalf of the applicant, Dell EMC, formerly EMC Corporation, comma, Beals and Thomas. So, on the Form A, it says name of applicant, Beals and Thomas. Doesn't say anything about Dell. And then it says name of property owner is EMC Corporation.
Oh, yeah.
So, doesn't say anything about Dell. So,
Name of property owner.
yeah, EMC Corporation, which according to the February 3rd letter was their former. On behalf of the applicant, Dell EMC. And then all of these plans that we have here that are stamped by the land surveyor, 28 January 2020, all the plans say prepared for EMC Corporation, record owners, EMC Corporation. No mention of Dell. So, it seems that the documents don't either reflect the existing names and the Form A doesn't explain how it's okay if the name of the applicant, Beals and Thomas, but the letter says on behalf of the applicant, Dell EMC. There's no mention of Dell EMC. I'll open it up to the board, but it seems like, not quite sure who we're dealing with here. And we've got these other documents. So for example, the plans with the EMC on them are dated 2015, even though they were stamped by the surveyor, which I think is different than the surveyor.
January 28, 2020.
Yes.
Is when they were stamped.
Yes.
Yep.
But the plans are dated 2015. And I thought I saw a different name for the surveyor on here, in addition to the Beals and Thomas. Open up to the board, but I think that these documents are, need to be cleared up. Mr. Mills.
So, I'm glad that we had Fuss and O'Neill look at them in terms of the complexity of what they're trying to do, and I don't have an issue with that. But I do agree with you, Mr. Chairman, that we want to do this right the first time, and it'd be very clear who the owner slash property owner applicant is, and that we have the right plans. So I'd be in favor of making sure that they are updated appropriately so it's consistent across the board.
I think that's could be the equipment they use, but I'm not clear. That's kind of why I recommended they should have somebody here to answer these questions. That might pop up in order to expedite. I think that's I can't be sure without looking it up. I can point out that on the assessor's records, it does say EMC Corporation. And at the top of the plan, it does say EMC Corporation, prepared for EMC, record owner's EMC, and then the record owner of the parcel that's also being conveyed to them by 50 Washington Limited Partnership, which is that top corner lot. The date is the date of the plans when they did do this work, and they've previously submitted these. They had their legal counsel spend time doing research. This is the best of my knowledge from what they had explained to me, to determine all the way back to county layouts, these two split to the middle of the old Washington Street. So there was trouble finding record ownership of that. And so there were some assumptions made, and legal counsel for them gave them feedback and support that what they were doing was appropriate. And then once they had that done is when they approached Southborough Planning Department, indicating that they would be resubmitting an A&R. They had not, well, approaching us for an A&R application. So that date is before I started here, but they said that these were the plans, that they just had been figured out deed-wise and ownership-wise. And it was Ken Conte himself who came in and delivered the plans and who had met with me to review the plans prior to doing any formal application. And also just to point out, I don't know if it makes a difference or not, but on the certificate of vote, it is dated June 2017 for EMC Corporation, which could be okay if it's the same people, if this hasn't changed.
Yeah, this is
But we
probably a
don't know.
reflection of, not knowing that much about this, but
It does say
is there such a thing as EMC Corporation anymore? Or is it really Dell EMC, as this letter indicates? So if it's Dell EMC, then that should be, record owner should be Dell EMC.
Correct, so it's conflicting. What they're saying here is formally, and on the plans, it's not reflecting that. And the assessor's records are changed on a yearly basis during tax time. Right.
So is that the date of this assessor's record, is 2016?
No, that's an inspection date. This I printed just today. I went to confirm the zone and some other information. I wanted to see that as well. I was actually confirming the parcels for the endorsement letter,
Yeah.
to make sure that I was referencing the right parcel and lots. But that's an inspection date. So what's this? This is
Last
print.
revision
Last revision.
was April of 2019, and I think it was Dell EMC the name was changed to Dell EMC prior to April of 2019. Does that sound right? I don't know. Anyways, it's got to get cleared up.
Yeah,
You were all set, Mr. Mills?
I am.
Mrs. Houlihan?
I concur with Mr. Mills. I think that it's confusing, the prepared for and the record owner. EMC officially became Dell in September of 2016 when the merger was approved. So it has been reflected as Dell EMC. So I guess that's the clarity that's required on the sheets. Who owns it and who is it prepared for?
Do you have enough information to go back, Karina?
I do. Yes, I do. And also the certificate of authority would be incorrect too, because that's not the proper naming. And I just assumed that the assessor card had, but they don't always, you can't, it even is, it always states you can't rely on the assessor information to be up to date or whatever. It's a reference.
Right, the responsibility is on whoever owns the property to make sure that these plans and the forms are properly filled out.
Okay.
And
My apologies for not noticing and
We're-
wasting your time.
we're considering this to be I guess defective or incomplete or confusing or improper Form A submittal, and therefore the clock on an A&R should not be ticking. Although if it is ticking, it would be the 3rd day of February, plus 30 days, so
It would
this
be
could be cleared up
at the meeting,
yeah, this could be cleared up at our,
at the next meeting.
The
That's
next
the
meeting.
deadline.
yeah. Hopefully, they'll get it cleared up and we'll be able to keep it moving. Any other questions or comments? Okay, let's move on to the next one. Next item on the agenda is a discussion item. 26 Main Street, St. Mark's School, ZBA special permit application. Conversion of a single family into a two-family dwelling. I'll ask the town planner to go over this for us.
This is a quick one. I received a email from the building department this afternoon saying, good afternoon, I just received application withdrawal request from Sandra Duran of St. Mark's School for a special permit at 26 Main Street. Please let me know if you have any questions. The building department had received email from St. Mark's School, Sandra Duran. Dear Katie, on behalf of St. Mark's School, we are withdrawing our application, which is the zoning board application for a special permit on January 6th for the reestablishment of a two-family dwelling at 26 Main Street without prejudice. Since Friday, it was confirmed that the two-family was a two-family. It still is a two-family, so there was no conversion required.
Any questions or comments? Okay, move on to the next one, which is discussion. House Bill 3507, Governor Baker's Housing Choice Initiative.
I'd like to point out that Ms. Dorian Jazinski is here. She's chair of SHOPSI, and we met this morning. This has been a topic that's come up and was discussed at SHOPSI. And I believe she's here to say her goal to eventually provide a letter to the state, to the governor's office, with a consensus of information of whether the town supports or does not support the bill. House Bill 3507, which is known as Governor Baker's Housing Choice Initiative, is draft legislation regarding promoting affordable housing and housing choices in Massachusetts. And I have a little cut sheet here that, let me just see if I have it in here. I'm sorry, I'm trying to juggle everything here. Hold on. Support letter. Here it is. Okay, so there was a workshop, and the woman who presented this bill, she's from the Board of Select from the town of Easton, I believe it was, Easton.
Littleton?
No, it was from Easton, no, you're right. We did receive a letter from Littleton, asking for Southborough to give an opinion and, encourage people to send letters to the governor's office to support, maybe quasi-support with some ideas from Needham and from Littleton, which is what brought this up to us. So Sarah and I presented this information to the Shopsy Committee so that they could review it. One of the biggest things of this act is regarding reducing from a majority vote down to, from a two-thirds vote down to a simple majority vote at town meeting on certain bylaws. And the bylaws are typically the bylaws that relate to housing and creating an easier path to have that kind of growth in your town. All right, so those documents, you know, you've seen them, you've looked at them. So the goal is to have the planning board come up with their feedback, which Shopsy can use along with the Board of Selectmen's feedback to create a letter back to the governor's office.
Right, and to our representative and our senator.
Yeah.
so.
Was that it, Karina?
Yeah, I stopped my long sentences, I'm sorry.
Dorian, welcome
rambling.
back.
Thank you for having
You're-
me here tonight.
You're on, whatever you wanted to tell us. And
Well, what I wanted to do was to ask the planning board to take a look at this bill. And I'm also going to ask the Board of Selectmen to take a look at this bill. And what I'd like to do is have a joint meeting with all of us together to try to get a consensus of how each of the different committees feels, to let Carolyn Dykema and Jamie Eldridge know how this affects the town of Southborough and whether we support it or we don't. I think this is a very important piece of legislation, that it definitely has an effect on the town, especially if you're going to reduce the two-thirds votes to a majority vote. I have my personal feelings on that. I cannot represent Shopsy's feelings. We have not voted on it. We've just, you know, we've just started discussing this. But I felt this was very important for these three boards to take a look at this bill and how it impacts the town of Southborough. Specifically, you know, making more, you know, the housing more dense. There's things, and most of the things in here, you already handle through your bylaws. If you look at that short form that really summarizes what this bill does, we already do it by special waivers or special permits. We don't need the state to tell us how to handle that. You already do that. The biggest problem I see with this bill is reducing the vote. You know, you've seen it happen in our town meetings, where you have one group of people who come in and they want something, and they bring all of their people in, and they could bring 100-plus people in, and they would be the majority vote, they'd leave. That's not what we want to happen with housing. At least I don't, that's not how I feel. So if you guys wouldn't mind, take a look, discuss the bill amongst yourselves, and then I'd like to have the woman who presented it at the MMA meeting that I attended, I'd like her to present it to the three boards and talk to you, get her feelings, her perspective on it, why she wants to push this through. That way you've heard from that side, we talk amongst ourselves, and then we all take a vote. And then Shopsy, I don't mind sending the letter in to the state based on how everybody feels. Let them know. I just think it's an important piece of legislation. We need to respond to them.
I can add to that Vanessa Hale has been corresponding with Dottie Fulgenetti, if that's how she's the select board from Easton, who presented at the workshop that Dorian attended, and Vanessa is trying to establish a meeting time. Unfortunately, she meets every night the planning board meets through June. So she was asking maybe we could do it at a Board of Selectmen's meeting, where the planning board could attend there instead. So Vanessa's asking us, you know, when the planning board might be available to participate in that discussion. So if you're open to one of the upcoming Board of Selectmen's meetings, if we could get, you know, at least a quorum of planning board.
are we? Looks like we are.
Yep.
So you got your answer on that one.
Good.
Great,
So we'll
thank
just
you.
hone in
I
on the right
appreciate
one.
that.
We just expect the selectmen at some point, if ever required to have them attend an additional meeting and a planning board meeting, that they would remember that it goes both ways. Majority of the selectmen.
want to point out there was a slide presentation that we loaded up that you can look at, and it gives you a nice summary of the effects and what the bill really means, so you can make a judgment of what you think.
Because you have that, you gave them this entire packet.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have all the information I have from the meeting. Just asking if you wouldn't mind taking a
So-
look at it.
I think you indicated that you have your own opinion relative to this. Have you made that public at all, your opinion?
No, but I don't mind telling you. But it's my personal opinion. It's not reflective of Shopsy.
Is the board prepared to give our opinion? Are we informed enough?
I would ask that you listen to the presentation so you
Okay.
hear their side before you would make a decision on that. I think you should hear both sides before.
Okay,
This definitely is going to have an impact on the town if this gets approved, so I would ask that you wait and hear the presentation and then take a vote on it as a board.
do we agree to wait?
Yes.
Okay,
Is that it?
is that it? Are we all set for
I'm in the
tonight?
hot seat, and you know I don't like being in the hot seat.
Very well, always. So if that's as far as we can go tonight, then thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Doreen. I'm sorry if you
Thanks.
had to wait so long.
I don't-
Appreciate you
I
coming,
would
though.
just be asleep on the couch.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is other business properly before the board, the planner's report, which I think is pretty brief.
Yes.
Feel like you now.
I didn't know.
Hold on, Jim, did you want to, okay.
I didn't.
Do that at the end.
Jim, check your mailbox.
Back to the town planner.
At the last planning board meeting, I was tasked to send a question to the town administrator regarding open meeting law and EDC's procedure. That has been done, just so you know. Also, responding to Andy's question from the last meeting about the history of maybe there was some land trade-off when schools buy up houses, residential homes, and they get them off the tax roll, if there was any reciprocity. There wasn't any history of anything like that from St. Mark's. And I didn't look beyond that to Fay School yet, but I can ask that as well.
That's okay.
Okay.
You don't have to look any further.
Okay, and those things are, I did query the town administrator and stuff, and for the majority, those are under Board of Selectmen jurisdiction, but there wasn't any history at this point of that. You all should have received a conflict of interest form from me and from Jim Hegarty. I sent you them as well in case you had different email. It's a quick acknowledgement form that you sign that you received a copy of the summary of the conflict of interest. Okay. I don't know if this passed yet. I had this here.
Feel free
There's-
to ask if anyone else has passed theirs in, because I just did.
I left mine on my printer.
You can email it to Jim Hegarty directly if you like.
It's not due until the end of the month, right?
I believe so. Andy has the instructions there.
Yeah. Planning board is usually, please acknowledge receipt within 30 days. And this was last Wednesday, the January 29th, so.
You're still okay.
The planning board takes pride in trying to be the most compliant and the most timely.
Thank you. I'll take that back, Andy. Thank you. Quickly here, I received a notification, certify your backyard as a wildlife habitat. Anyone can create a welcoming haven for local wildlife. There's a website on this. This was, you can contact the conservation agent if you're interested in this program. Just putting a shout out there. Turning your yard, balcony, container garden, schoolyard, work, landscape, or roadside greenscape into a certified wildlife habitat is fun, easy, and can make a lasting difference for wildlife. So contact Melissa Danza, conservation agent, if you're interested in that.
Karina, just one addition, there is a small fee to do that.
Oh, there
But
is.
I can proudly say that I did register.
Okay, I didn't have, thanks for adding that. We have a notice from Eversource, neighbors to the west, there was an article. There's a gas line proposed through a portion of Southborough. You may want to research that. A proposed high-pressure gas pipeline in Southborough and Westborough prompted vocal opposition at a Westborough meeting recently. It was an interesting article. It's kind of preliminary concepts right now, so now's the time to speak. And that is it.
Back to that wildlife, you said you signed up for that, Marnie? I don't know if you heard the coyotes the other night. How does that, your backyard becomes a wildlife, does it include the coyotes, or?
No, there's certain qualifications, like you have dense forest, places where animals can procreate and raise their young, and that they're not interrupted. So it's really just meeting certain criteria, and if your backyard meets those criteria, then you can register. So the coyotes have a party in my backyard almost every other night, so we love it. We love Southborough for the coyotes.
And just to point out, this is an effort between Conservation and Open Space Preservation Commission.
That's good. Our next meeting is February 24th. Any other questions or comments on tonight? For those who haven't heard, with sadness, we learned that Selectman Brian Shea's mother passed away last Thursday, and pass along our deepest condolences to Brian and his family. Mr. Mills.
I'll make a motion, we approve the meeting minutes from Monday, January 6, 2020, as amended.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded.
I got your edits, Andy? Mr.
Yeah,
Mills?
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I just need
Microphone.
to oh, God. Can you just tell me if the word I circled is supposed to be exiting or existing?
What line?
Oh, 216.
Oh, existing.
Okay, I thought so.
Any other questions or comments? All in favor? Okay, that takes care of that set. Mr. Mills.
Make a motion that we approve the meeting minutes from Monday, January 27th, 2020, as written.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Okay, those are approved. Any other questions or comments? Anyone from the public?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? We're adjourned.